everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hello, if you're new here, it's lovely to have you and I hope you choose to stick around and subscribe. It's completely free. It just means I pop up in your subscription boxes every time I upload a new video. On to today's video, and I thought I would round off our holiday vlogs with a little bit of a sit down, a little bit of a chatty video, just going into a little bit more depth into some of the things I mentioned throughout the holiday vlogs. I think I did this before, possibly joined on to one of the holiday vlogs last year, can't fully remember, and I have to admit I haven't looked back and checked, but I felt like I needed to this time. So I thought I would talk all things to do with Tattershall Lakes, what we thought of the caravan, our issues, things like that. Also, as a whole, the actual grounds and things to do and the activities that we did, because I didn't really speak too much about it. Added to that, I thought I would just delve in a little bit more into some of the places you saw during those vlogs. So I've got my notes. I've got a lot of notes, I have to say. I have the worst memory ever, so yeah, I've written quite a few notes. So if I look down, you'll know what I'm doing basically. Just for a little clarity, it has been about a week and a half since I edited the holiday vlogs and I can't fully remember what I said in them, I'm not gonna lie. So I don't know if some things I edited out so that I may mention when I said this and you don't actually know what I'm on about because I've edited it out. There could be a few moments like that, so apologies. However, if we take it right back to the beginning, just to give a bit of context on this video, because obviously, like I said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about our accommodation and the park as a whole and things like that. So we booked the holiday that we've just come back from a year ago. We booked it whilst we were there for Nellie's first holiday, which the vlogs are on this channel as well, so you can have a look. Because there was a deal that if you booked it whilst you were there, you had money off, you had the options of the best pick. That was how it was sold to us. You know, rather than doing a late deal or something, can you just get in whatever's left kind of thing. So we thought, great, you know, we paid our deposit, we've paid throughout the year, because that is the great thing about away resorts, you can pay for it in segments throughout the year. It's not just one big lump sum, which, let's face it, these days is very, very scary. And yeah, we just we were told that we may not get the same caravan number that we had been in, but it would be in the same sort of area, it would be the same standard. Yeah, they would basically try their best for us. And we thought, okay, you know, we're happy with that. I'm away from it. You know, I edited the holiday vlogs. We enjoyed the rest of the year, started looking forward to it this year and everything. So we set off on the Monday, but the Friday before we set off, I had a phone call and I missed it, unfortunately, literally by 2 minutes. So I phoned straight back, and obviously by the time you get through the systems and everything like that, someone finally answered, and I explained I'd had a missed call, no voicemail message. I hadn't asked somebody to call me. And nobody knew what I was on about. She went off and asked the team. Nobody had apparently phoned me. She just didn't have a clue what I was on about. So she was like, let me have your booking reference. I'll look in on the system, see if there's any notes, blah, blah, blah. So I gave that and there were no notes. So she's like, so I don't really know how to help you because I don't know where they phoned. And I was like, right, okay. And then she's like, just to confirm, your booking is. And obviously I booked for 2 adults, 1 child, and the booking that she had on her screen was for 7 adults and 2 children. And I was like, well, no, that's not what I've booked. And I knew that wasn't what I booked, because on my booking confirmation it very clearly said 2 adults, 1 child. She's like, all right, that's okay, I can amend it. She starts deleting people off and this, that and the other. So it's all sorted for you, don't worry, just turn up on Monday, it's absolutely fine. And that set my anxiety off on a whole new level, because I was like, something just doesn't feel right. And I couldn't work out if I was going to get there and my holiday be cancelled because she's deleted people off a booking, or whether she deleted somebody else's booking. I don't know. And to this day, I really don't know. But thankfully, we did still have a booking when we got there. So yeah, I was already a little bit confused and a little bit like, this is a bit weird to start with. But anyway, that is that. Obviously, I said in the vlogs when we were doing the prep that we wanted to leave at about 5. We actually ended up leaving just after 6, so it was only an hour delay. And to be fair, traffic was on our side, so we made up the time anyway. If we'd have left at 5 and the traffic had been as good as it had been, we'd have been sat hanging around for a lot longer, because the first stop off was obviously the services, so they're open all the time, that's absolutely fine. But the second stop off, the National Memorial Arboretum, didn't open until I think it was 10 o'clock. So yeah, we wouldn't have been able to get in or any further on our day had we have been any earlier. So it wasn't all bad, and to be honest, the traffic was really easy to handle, barely anybody on the road, so that made it a bonus. We had already booked our parking for the National Memorial Arboretum, and on their website it's basically said that that would guarantee your entry because you've already got this pre-booked parking space. They're already set out, and even if that car park's full, like, because you've pre-booked, you can still get in. Now obviously we arrived just when it was opening. In fact, we were just turning into the car park and I could see the queue of people outside waiting to get in, and by the time we'd like parked up, they were going in, so we generally got there just as it was opening. And the man gave us this ticket thing, which then directed us down to the pre-booked area, which actually I would definitely recommend doing, because where we were in the pre-booked area was right next to the disabled bit, which was right next to the door. There are a lot of car parks there, some are a lot further away than others, and yeah, definitely recommend, if you don't want to walk too far, pre-book your parking first. So that cost us £5, so it didn't make any difference because we would have to pay anyway. So yeah, it just meant that we had our space booked and we knew that we could get in there. Even if we were slightly later, it didn't matter, we knew we could get in there basically. It was glorious weather, as you would have seen from the vlogs, but oh my gosh, it was hot by like lunchtime, and I think me and Ash both underestimated just how big it was. Yeah, it was one of those things, because I was like, beforehand I was like, oh, it's all right if we don't get to see everything, like it won't matter, this, that and the other. And then all of a sudden, like, you get there and you see all these memorials and you just want to read them all, and you kind of feel a bit like, I don't want to miss a really good one. Like, they're all good in their own right, you know, they're all great memorials, but yeah, it was one of those things where you just didn't know where to look, you didn't know which way to go. Like, it was just a bit overwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. I think if I had known what it was going to be like, I'm not saying I wouldn't have done it on this trip, but I definitely think to get the most out of it, you should stay nearby for a weekend and split it over 2 days and do 2 different sections, because yeah, there was a lot. All the memorials were so well kept, and I mean so well kept. They were clean, like everything was trimmed, the grass was trimmed, like the bushes, the flowers, everything was just as you would want a memorial to be. Some of them were set in like beautiful grounds, others were just like down the pathways, but they all felt like they had their own little spot there. And I think that was, yeah, it just made it even nicer, because I didn't have to worry about Nelly standing in dog poo or standing and picking up rubbish or things like that, because there just wasn't any of it at all. It reminded me a little bit of going abroad to certain countries where they're super clean, and you don't have that worry that you necessarily get over here in England. There was obviously like gardeners and stuff, you know, trimming, cutting grass, cutting bushes, pruning, like all of that good stuff. But there were also other volunteers going around that were just making sure that nobody dropped any litter. You know, there wasn't like the odd tissue blowing away, like there generally was nothing. It was so well kept. Yeah, it just made it so pleasant to walk around in. There is a land train which you can use. I don't know if there's a cost for it. I must admit, we didn't inquire about it. We didn't use it. Probably in hindsight, we maybe should have. But they gave like a tour of the different memorials and stuff, I believe, on the train from what we could see and hear. But we just wanted to get off and explore it, take our own photos and videos and things like that. So we just made our own way round. But if you can't walk very far, or you don't want to walk very far, then that is definitely an option that you'll probably want to take advantage of. One thing I will say is that the staff was so welcoming. They were lovely. It was such a warm welcome the second we walked in through the door. Yeah, they were really pleasant, they were really nice. And I didn't really do too much research of the Memorial Arboretum before we went, but it turned out they were doing a stickman trail for the little kiddies. And so because obviously we had Nelly, they asked if we'd like a map, and if we wanted to do the trail then we could. And then at the end, because you had like little, I don't know what you call them, are they like little rub-ins? You do it with the crayon. You had 4 different ones to collect, and at the end you got a sticker, which was actually quite a nice little keepsake for Nelly for the start of our holiday. Like, they explained exactly how you got there, they explained what was in different parts, they asked if there were specific memorials that we wanted to see, which in hindsight maybe we should have had a list and could have told them, because I think we missed out on a couple that maybe we would have wanted to see, but we didn't do any research. We didn't know where any of the memorials were. We kind of just drew a blank and were like, we're just happy to explore. So the staff gave their recommendations on that, which is, you know, is fair enough. They had an amazing section that was all about the POWs in like Burma and like the railway and things like that. So obviously we had to see that because both of our families are very much connected to that, and that was kind of the pathway we took. And then we double backed and went through some of the other memorials and then onto the Stickman Trail, which, yeah, was really, really good. Really enjoyed that and got some nice photos with Nelly. My main reason for wanting to go there was to see the Shot at Dawn Memorial, and I'm so glad I got to see it. I mean, the signpost for it is everywhere. Every direction leads to that memorial, and I can really see why. But it was such an emotive place, especially around that memorial. I mentioned it in the vlogs, but yeah, it really did bring a tear to your eye to know that each of the wooden posts represented a person. They represented a man that in today's world would have got the help that they needed. You know, they wouldn't have been seen as a coward or absolutely exhausted and, you know, fallen asleep. They were just seen as unpatriotic and were shot. And it's such a scary thing to think that 100 years ago that was the norm. But yeah, so it was really moving. And each post, I don't know if I got it in the video clips that I shared, but each post had a number on it, and it also had the information of the person it represented. There were a couple that were unknown only to God, but the majority had a name, they had an age, and when you read the ages, yeah, it just, yeah, well, I get emotional thinking about it now. Like, words just could not explain the atmosphere there. I don't know if it was because it was quiet, but it was kind of that thing of, as we were walking down there, like a couple were walking out, and then as we were walking out there was another couple going in. Because it's such a vast area, I feel like we were all spread out. There wasn't what you get at some memorials and places like that where there's loads of people and then someone gets in your photo, you can't get a good photo or you can't get the perspective of it. Like, it wasn't like that at all. It was so quiet. There were no birds singing in that area, and that's the bit that really got me. It was eerily quiet. And I don't know if that was just a fluke or what, because there were birds singing and you could hear traffic and everything in other areas, but in this particular area there was silence, other than Nelly whinging at certain points. So that for me was one of my favourites, especially the way it's thought out. Like, not only have you got those posts, but you've got the statue of the person blindfolded so that you can see what they kind of, how their end came, if you like. And then the thing that I did put a little video clip up of the sign that said it, but I don't know if it was really taken on board. But the 6, I think they were like fern trees or something, in a line were meant to represent the firing squad. So then when you stood behind those trees and looked at the statue, you could see what the firing squad saw. If you stood at the statue and looked that way, if he hadn't had the blindfold on, you could see what they would see. And yeah, it was just very, very moving, I have to say. There were so many moving memorials there that I couldn't mention them all, but I did have to mention that one, of course. But yeah, highly recommend a visit. It's not all war memorials and things either. There are charities, the local charities near there. There are national charities. One in particular is the SANS charity, so like the stillbirth charity, which is very close to our family's heart. And in that one in particular, although I didn't have a pen, which I was gutted about in a way because I really wanted to, but they had stones, like pebbles and things that you could write a message on. You could, write your own remembrance message for infant that had passed away, and I just thought it was a really nice touch. And there were a few different places like that where you could leave your own little memorial, your own little piece of your heart there as well, which I think, yeah, it just made it all that more touching and that better connection. And then from the National Memorial Arboretum, we went to the caravan. So we were staying at Tattershall Lakes. As I mentioned, we booked it a year in advance, and whilst I had some anxiety about what this phone call had been about, it kind of not slipped my mind, but I just wasn't worried about it because as far as I was concerned, I had my booking reference and they would have to just sort it out. So when you turn up on site, you get waved through at security. They tell you to go and park down at guest services, which is super easy to find. Like, you can't go wrong. You basically just drive straight, and when you see the car park, you turn into it. It's none of this, like, some of them are a bit more hidden and things like that. Like, it's not the case at all. So we rock up there and go on in. They were really smooth and efficient, from turning up at the security gate to having our caravan number, and in fact being in the caravan was 5 minutes. Like, it was so smooth and quick, which is obviously what you want in a sense. However, alarm bells did start ringing because when he handed over the key and gave us the map, which I've got here so that I don't muck up the name of where we were staying, he turned around and he said the weirdest comment, which was, "I'm sorry, but this is all we had left." And it's still puzzling me because in the nicest possible way, we booked it a year in advance. And I just thought it was a bit of a weird comment for him to come out with anyway. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But it set alarm bells ringing, and I was like, right, okay. So what's wrong with this area or this caravan? Because you've kind of just said that it's not the best. So yeah, that was that. Obviously, Ash was a little bit, should we say grumpy? I don't quite know if it was upset or pissed off or what, because we weren't in the area that we wanted to be in. We were very much in an area that you couldn't really see anything. You could hear the planes and that was about it. So yeah, he was a bit, a bit miffed with that, shall we say. But yeah, as I mentioned in the vlogs, we ended up being right on the edge of the park. It was the last place you could actually stay. Don't get me wrong, there were like another row of caravans behind us, which was even closer to the road, which, God forbid you ended up getting put in one of those. I don't know how people would cope if you got put in one of those. I'm just grateful we were like a row in, but my God, the noise at night and early morning. But onto that in a minute. When we booked it last year, obviously we said we wanted the same as what we had last year. We said we wanted the option with the decking. We wanted to ideally be in that area. I didn't mind whereabouts in that area. It could have been anywhere, but we wanted to be basically north of the main lake. But yeah, we wanted like the decking. We wanted a similar, I don't know what you call it, like level class of caravan that we had. So when we rocked up at this caravan and there were no decking, there were just some rickety steps to get into it, which, believe you me, they were rickety. Yeah, it wasn't quite what we were expecting, shall we say. The steps, not only were they rickety, but it was quite a big drop down. They were quite, how do you put it? So this is the caravan door. The steps went down like that. And so there was a big drop, which Nelly could fall down, which obviously meant that we couldn't open the door when she was awake because she would just tumble out of them easily. And to be fair, even when we were with her, she kept trying to climb out of them, which was a pain in the bum. But that is what it is. It would have just been so much easier if we could have had the decking that we asked for, basically. Ash did ask about it, and the answer to it was basically told, oh no, you've booked on to whatever class, Supreme or something like that. You don't get it with that. It's only luxury and above. Which, okay, fair enough. Nobody explained that to us, and because we'd asked for the option with the decking, they should have booked us under luxury, but the person in guest services didn't do that. So maybe it's partly our fault, but it's not completely, if that makes sense. Massive alarm bells, and definitely something that I think going forward, I would definitely keep her in the car seat until we'd had a look around kind of thing. When we walked in there, the knives were on one of the lowest shelves that you could get, and Nellie would have picked them up. And I don't mean like just, you know, like knives to eat your food with. These were like sharp kitchen knives. Yeah, they were on a low shelf that Nellie definitely would have picked up straight away. So thankfully we did manage to get them out the way before she saw them. If you had 2 kids or something, the chances are they probably would have picked it up. If you're trying to control one and the other runs off, like, the chances are it would have been a whole different story. So yeah, that was like heart in mouth moment. But thankfully we averted danger. We paid a lot of money, and I say a lot of money, I can't fully remember how much. I'll put the prices on screen. I know that I think the high chair was £12, but we paid to hire a high chair and also a 2-pack of towels. So it was like 2 hand towels, 2 bath towels. Because if I took the high chair up that we have, then we wouldn't have fitted anything else in the car because our high chair is bulky. And also we would have taken up so much room in the suitcase having towels. So in the end I was like, well, I'm paying for the high chair, I'll just pay for a couple of towels, and then it's less to bring home and wash as well, which, you know, is amazing. So like, in my opinion, I paid a lot of money for a high chair. In fact, I used to sell high chairs at Mothercare for the same price. I hired this high chair for a week, and what we got was not what I was expecting, because the high chair had somebody else's food still on it. It was literally like the, you know, the cleaning staff or whoever had collected it and just put it in the next one. They hadn't cleaned it. They hadn't checked it. Like, yeah, it was grim. I'm just glad I went and bought some cleaning products, because I did scrub it. And I'll be honest, at the end, I didn't clean it because it's just not my place. I cleaned it for the duration that Nellie was using it, but I was a bit like, why should I spend ages scrubbing it just so that the next person has it clean, you know? Maybe that's wrong, I don't know. But I was just like, why should I? I'm on holiday. Why should I be cleaning up what they should have already done? It just made me so grateful that I didn't hire a travel cot, because yeah, she wouldn't have been staying in it. I'd have had to go out and buy one if it was anywhere near as grim as what the high chair was. In terms of the towels, when we arrived, I was looking forward to jumping in the shower quickly, or at least having a wash, a freshen up before we went and did the food shop. And the towels went in there despite me paying for them. So then that was a whole rigmarole, because we had to chase around and say we didn't have these towels. It took them over an hour to get the towels to us, by which point we'd gone and done the food shop, because I was just like, this is just pointless. Yeah, that wasn't fun either, I'm not gonna lie. Now, one of the things I did mention in the vlogs was ants, and I'll try and leave a photo up of my clean cup one morning that was out on the side ready to have my cup of tea in. Yeah, it was grim. I can't lie, they were everywhere. It started off in the front of the caravan, and then they just slowly progressed. Or I say the front, it was like the front, mainly the kitchen and the spare room, which were all on that same side. But that first night, like I said it in the vlog, I could feel ants crawling on me. Like, you'd go to the toilet and you'd see the ants crawling up the wall, and yeah, it just wasn't very nice. There was ant powder in one of the food cupboards, which then in itself made a bit of an issue, because I had to make sure that it didn't get in the food. But obviously they were trying to resolve the issue, kind of. But yeah, apparently it was just one of those things that there was nothing they could do. We had spent £75 on food and drink, and it was a battle to keep the ants out of it, to the point I had to put the bread in the microwave, someone else went in the oven. Like, it was grim. Added to that, I don't know if somebody had turned the fridge off, or if somebody had just had something really revolting smelling, but the smell that came out of the fridge was next level gross. Like, it was horrible. To the point, I think even in one of the vlogs I turned around and said, I don't want to, I think it was when I did the tour, and I was just like, I don't want to leave that open, because it really reeked. It was horrible. It was gut-wrenching, like I could have thrown up smell. So that was the ant situation, which did put quite a dampener on it at the beginning of the week, because they were crawling all over Nellie's bottles. They were in her toys. They were in our clothes. Like, you'd pick up your knickers and, you know, like a clean pair, and they'd be in them. And I just remember saying to Ash, I'm going to have to fumigate everything when I get home. Thankfully, it got a bit cooler. We had a storm, which wasn't very pleasant, I'm not going to lie. That is coming from somebody that doesn't like storms. And things got a bit cooler. There was rain, and, you know, the ants went back underground relatively. There was still a few around, but yeah, it wasn't as bad. And I get that we're on a caravan park, like I've got my own caravan. I understand it to a large extent. However, I didn't have that ant problem in my caravan. So yeah, I was just a little bit like, you know, there are things that could be done, but nevertheless. I think I mentioned the shower. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but think I mentioned the shower. Basically, the shower didn't have a cold tap. So it just had an on-off situation in which you couldn't change the temperature. The only way you could actually change the temperature was via the temperature on the boiler. But even lowering that didn't lower it because there was no cold. So it was definitely very, very scalding. I'm just glad that Nelly had the paddling pool that I took for her. So we like filled it up and then some cold water from the sink. But yeah, I definitely came back with like scald marks on mainly my arms. Trying to like wash my hair was just an absolute nightmare. On the like last night, I ended up washing it, but I didn't get all the shampoo and conditioner out of it. And I was like, do you know what? I'll just leave it and rewash it when I get home, because it was just that painful to stand in the shower. I mentioned about the noise. The road noise was something else, especially at 5 o'clock in the morning, when obviously the road must have got busier as people were going to and from work and things. You could hear people like beeping their horn 9-10 o'clock at night, which obviously then woke Nelly. And it wasn't a restful holiday, you could say. Like, we were out doing a lot of stuff in the day and I just wanted to come home, relax, fall asleep in bed. And yeah, it was too noisy. It didn't make it as fun because I'd wake up in the morning tired before I'd even begun the day. And between that and the ants, I kind of just didn't want to be in the caravan. So we ended up doing like walks around the park and things like that, just so that I didn't have to be in the caravan, basically. Which, when you've paid nearly £500 for a holiday, you want to be able to stay in your accommodation, but it is what it is. Cleanliness was next level grim. There were like somebody's toenail or fingernail pickings on the floor in the kitchen that hadn't been swept up. There was the previous occupants' undergarments were under the bed, which I could see straight away. I mean, I know I'm a cleaner, so maybe I look in places that others don't, but this was literally like, you could see it straight away. There was like more undergarments in the wardrobe, and yeah, it just, I don't know, it was just grim. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say I have hugely high standards. Yes, I'm a cleaner, but I wouldn't say I have huge standards because I have a toddler. She's messy. There's always crumbs everywhere. Like, you know, I'm not expecting pristine conditions, but that was going a little bit too far. I did like clean it several times just because I had to. I gave it like a good once over, and I would definitely say the caravan overall was cleaner when we left than when we got there. I can't remember, I think I made a bit of a jibe in one of the vlogs. I think it was when we were watching the Lancaster, because we were watching the Lancaster and it was doing circuits, and then it did a display, and then it did more circuits and things like that. And the cleaner was opposite, cleaning out the caravan that people had left. And she took like 2.5 hours to clean the caravan. And for the first 20 minutes, she was hidden in the bin stall smoking. Then we could see her, even though she'd shut the blinds, because the breeze was obviously blowing the blinds, we could see her, she was just sat on the sofa in there. That was another 20 minutes. And I was just like, no wonder these caravans aren't clean if that's what she's doing. So that kind of explained why my caravan was as filthy as it was, because their cleaner was taking the piss. I've obviously already mentioned about the knives, and it wasn't a very toddler friendly caravan. I know it's very subject in terms of that. They don't sell themselves as toddler friendly, but I think because the one we had last time was very, I would say it was toddler friendly in a sense. I suppose just naively, I just thought this one was going to be as well, and it really wasn't. There was like a gas fire that was Nelly level perfect, with the gas knob exactly where she could get to it, which, yeah, it was a recipe for disaster. Thankfully, the knob fell off more times than I care to admit, rather than her actually try and turn it on. And we did try and block it off as best as possible, but toddlers get in everywhere, and she was constantly in at this gas fire. Added to that, the unit that the TV was on, like the amount of time she hit her head on that, and around the back of the sofa there was like a ledge, she hit her head on that. It was just, yeah, it was difficult. They had like cast iron legs on like the chair, on, well, they weren't even chairs, they were like stools. She'd hit her head on the radiator. It was all, the front room or like living room area was just really not toddler friendly or child friendly for that matter. If we had had that caravan, even just in terms of like the toddler friendliness, the layout and stuff like that, obviously the ants and things, if we had had that caravan the previous year, we wouldn't have booked for this year, that is for sure. I'll go a little bit more into Tattershall Lakes a bit later in this video, but I thought I would also go into more depth about the places that we went to. First up, let's talk about the Petwood Hotel. Now, I keep calling it the Petwood. I've called it the Petwood for years. I can't get it out of my mind. So in the vlogs, I've either said Petwood or Petwood, or I've had a large pause in between because I've tried to work out the right way of saying it. However, it is obviously, as I mentioned on the vlogs, was home to the Dambuster Squadron. It's a very, very historic place. It's a beautiful place as well. It was absolutely stunning. And we loved looking around the gardens and exploring. It was very pushchair friendly. Don't get me wrong, there were a couple bits that weren't, but that was mainly due down to, it was a bit boggy where it was in amongst the trees, and obviously we'd had rain in the weeks previous, and you could see there had been a storm or something because there was a couple trees down. So that's not their fault, that was just part of the elements. But largely as a whole, we took the pushchair around. Nellie loved it. She walked for little bits of it, and it was just really, really nice to see in the gardens. And actually, when we went to Thorpe Camp at the end of the week, there was a photo in there from the Petwood Hotel of the water fountain that me and Nellie stood at. Yeah, it was just really nice to see. Well, we stood there and you could see these aircrew stood around this water fountain as well for this photo. So it was a really, really historic place. Sadly, they were setting up for like an event or a dinner or something in the bar that we actually wanted to go to, which was the reason, in a sense, we were there, because it was the bar that Guy Gibson and loads of other aircrew used to drink at. But we did get to have a quick look in there, as long as we didn't destruct anything. We did get to have a quick look in there to take a video clip and things like that while they were setting up. So they were really accommodating and nobody shooed us out. Like, they were really friendly. So I'm really grateful for that, because it wasn't a wasted journey. Like, we got to see everything there that we wanted to see. You can have like lunch and light bites on the terrace, or like more in-depth meals and things like that. We chose not to, just because it's a beautiful location. People are going there to enjoy the atmosphere as well as the food. And they probably don't want Nellie screaming, because by that point it was near nap time. So, you know, we were just like, no, it's not quite the setting to have a meal with Nellie. If we were on our own, we probably would have, but not with Nellie. I'm not saying it's not family friendly, because it is family friendly, but we just know our daughter. And yeah, I didn't want that for us as well as the other guests. So from there, just down the road, we went to the Bluebell Inn, and I think this is probably my highlight of the trip. I thought the Petwood would be, but the Bluebell Inn at Woodhall Spa was amazing. I'd read so many times about these pennies that had been kept in the beams for when the aircrew returned. You know, they put it in for their next pint, and then they still stayed there because they never come home. And it's one thing reading it, it's a completely different thing seeing it. And I walked in, saw them, and my eyes started watering straight away, just at the thought that these young men that had put it in there for good luck, but their luck had run out. Yeah, it was pretty special. And we went in there. They had like straightaways, because we went in the side door, I guess you would call it, or the back entrance, because we parked in the car park. They did have a front entrance, but I think I saw one person go in the front entrance. Everyone else used the side entrance. But they straight away had like a glass cabinet with all these artifacts in, with like medals and different bits from aircraft, and so much stuff in there. So we were looking at that, and then we went straight into the bar, and they had Thatcher's on tap. So of course I had a cider. This was after my expensive cider, which I will mention later in the video, but the expensive cider was first. So we kind of made like a bit of a joke that at least this is reasonably priced. And we were sat there and we were taking it all in. I chose like to sit inside the bar rather than outside, because it was quite warm, and I just thought, hotness and being near the road and everything, I just thought it'd be safer for Nelly to be indoors. And if she kicked up a fuss, we could go and sit outside. There was plenty of benches outside to sit on. So that is what we did. And I chose the bench or the seating area, went and sat down. There was only one other couple sat in there with us. There was others sat out like side and things like that, but it was just one other couple in there. And I sat underneath the Yeovilton signatures of Yeovilton crews that have since visited there and signed the ceiling, which was just uncanny because I just looked up and I was like, that's Yeovilton. Like I couldn't have picked it. I didn't know that those signatures were there, but it just felt a little bit like a piece of home, which was funny. But yeah, reading all of the signatures, past and present, you know, was amazing. Seeing these coins in the beams. We went into like the back room and they had like the sign in from, I think it was Winston Churchill's, was it grandson or great grandson, something like that. Yeah, just so much. It's such a historic place that we decided to stay and order food. And I'm gutted because I didn't actually take any photos or videos of the food. We just ate it. But honest to God, we had burger and chips and it is the most delicious meal I think I've ever had. Like for a country pub and you look at it and you think, oh yeah, you know, get a pint, you probably get like pie and mash or something and it'd just be bog standard. No, the food was incredible. I would go back just alone on the food. I really would, let alone the history, let alone all the artifacts and things like that. The food alone, I would go back on. And like the staff were also welcoming. Even the chef cut, like when he walked past, said hello to Nelly, and they were just so friendly. They really were so friendly. I wish we could have gone back again during that trip because I would have really liked to have gone back, but timing just wasn't on our side, sadly. But yeah, really worth visiting there. On to Coningsby. Now, I've got a love-hate relationship with Coningsby. I've got a lot of good memories there and I've got a hell of a lot of bad memories there. And we decided to go to the Spotters car park. We tried to do that last year, but we didn't get there early enough, having like, you know, a young baby. We just didn't get out of the caravan quick enough. So we knew we had to get there early. If you want a spot at the Spotters car park, you do have to get there early because it's quite small. You can usually fit 3 rows of cars in. The general rule is taller vehicles go at the back, so you've got like your vans, your motorhomes and things like that, and then the smaller ones at the front. So we rocked up at 10 o'clock, despite the fact flying wasn't starting until like 12:01, something like that. You know, and everything was fine. Nelly had been in our pushchair for a little bit. Then we put her back in because it was getting a bit warm. But we left the pushchair out because it had the snooze shade on it. I couldn't be doing with putting it away to then get it out again if we needed to get it out. Like, it was just one of those things. And then these 2 cars that had been parked decided they wanted to squeeze into the gap of what should be one car. And then got really arsey because we didn't shut the door because we had the door open for airflow because it was hot. And like you could still park in there, like they could have still done it easily. They just suddenly wanted all of the room that they could possibly get. And there was a bit of a standoff, shall we say. We moved the door in, they could have got in. They then chose not to move the car forward enough so their arse was sticking out, which then made it awkward for everyone else. But the woman basically proceeded to turn around and say that I was a really bad mother because I shouldn't have brought Nelly there. It was too hot. I was cruel if I thought I was going to put her in a pushchair on a sunny day, and a lot of this other stuff. And I don't know if it's just me, but the more people say that like I'm a bad mum or this, that or the other, or criticise me when I'm out, when they don't know me, when they don't know my situation, I dig my heels in even further. So I was just laughing at them. I just couldn't help it. I was just laughing. But I was sat there and I was thinking, do you know what? This is the last time I'm coming to the Spotters car park, because every time there's an issue of some sort. When I came before, there was an issue with the type of vehicle that I arrived in. Like, there was just, and somebody else made a comment about something that I was wearing, and it's just, yeah, it's just not the pleasant place you would think it would be. Added to that, there were a few people that I knew there, some that I speak to and I like, and there were a couple that are very much on my block list. So yeah, it was just all in all a little bit awkward. So we watched the display, or the practice display. I didn't film it because I just stood there with Nelly and I thought, do you know what, you can say I'm a bad mum all you like, I don't care. And I just stood there holding her and we watched it together, and and it was a lovely moment. Do I wish I'd filmed it? Yeah, in a sense I do, but I didn't want her moaning about how much of a bad mum I was in the background of my video. So that was that, and we packed up. And yeah, I made the vow not to go there again, which then led us on to looking for other locations that weren't necessarily the main locations people go to. And we found a couple, and you would have seen the video clips that I took from those locations in the holiday vlogs that I did. And yeah, overall, like, that made up for it massively. And to be honest, I got better video clips from those locations than what I would have done at the Spotters car park anyway. So it all worked out fine in the end. Then we went to Skeg Vegas. Now, I know Skeg Vegas has got a lot of bad press, it's got a bad reputation, but I think maybe that's more the nighttime side. I don't know. I didn't read too much into the bad press of it, because I think sometimes when you do that, it scares you off and you don't see the real beauty of a place. I can't believe I'm saying Skegness is beautiful. However, I did really enjoy it. I'm not going to lie. I loved looking around all the shops. There were so many of those like souvenir shops where, you know, you get a fridge magnet, you get like little tacky things, whatnot, like just nice. I managed to pick up my friend Ellie a present in one of the souvenir shops. I'm sure if she's watching this, if I haven't given it to her already, she'll know exactly what I'm on about. But yeah, I'm not going to show it on here because it won't make these videos very PG. But we enjoyed looking around those. I looked around some charity shops that were there. I managed to pick up Nelly a really beautiful top for like 50p. Yeah, and we just had a lovely time looking around the shops. Obviously, we had to get oil because the car ran out of oil. And who knew it, there was a shop that sold car oil on the high street there. So yeah, it was like perfect. I bought a picnic blanket so that we could sit out back at the caravan, because obviously we didn't have no outside space. There was no seating to sit outside. Which, as a side note, the lady that, or woman, I wouldn't call her a lady, she wasn't very ladylike, that said I was a bad mum and I shouldn't have brought her out, this, that and the other. The alternative to her sitting in a car with a cool breeze running through it, because we had the doors open, was for her to sit in a stifling hot caravan. So I knew I wasn't a bad mum. I knew I was doing the right thing. And yeah, stuff her basically. Anyway, back to Skeg Vegas. We did think about doing the aquarium, but I looked at the prices, and whilst they weren't super, super expensive, it would have been like £34 for us as a family to go in there, and I just thought it could be used better. So yeah, we thought about doing the aquarium, but like I say, it was a little bit too expensive, and we could use that money to have something nice for lunch, which in turn turned out to be KFC, which was just what we needed, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, so we saved the money on that and just decided to mooch around, and to be honest, that was more than enough. There was so much to see. We saw the famous, is it the clock tower? We looked around the shops, we had lunch, we had a walk on the beach, and we went on the pier as well, which, as a side note, it was difficult to see when we first came in, because there was just steps on one side, and at the front you think you can go in and then there's steps, which makes it really awkward, but around the other side was a slope, so we managed to get the pushchair in and out. But yeah, we did some 2p machines. Ash did some sort of action adventure shooting thing, and then we went out and sat on the actual pier outside itself, and they were playing some banging cheesy tunes, which, to be honest, was just what I needed. I think they're on the video clips. It did come up with a copyright, but it said I could still use it. So yeah, hopefully they're on the video clips, because it was good. It added to the atmosphere. We enjoyed the walk along the beach as well. We put like the pushchair back in the car and then just went back down to the beach so that Nelly could get sandy toes. And yeah, it was just a nice day out. Then the other thing we did was Tattershall Farm Park, which cost us £7.95 an adult, which I don't think was too bad, to be honest, because down here it's like £8 an adult anyway, so it's the kind of the going rate. Under twos were free, which was obviously a big bonus. The price of the adult did depend if it was a weekday off-peak or a weekend peak ticket, so just bear that in mind, but it was only like £1 or £2 difference. It was still worth it. Yeah, we had a really lovely time. We bought 2 bags of animal feed. That was really reasonable. And if anything, I probably would have just bought 1 bag of animal feed, because everybody was feeding the animals. Not all the animals wanted to eat, and there were a few that you couldn't feed, like the horses and things like that, which is understandable. There were a few that were on like special diets, and for various other things, some were a bit too nippy to allow little fingers near them. It was really nice to see the animals. Nelly loved the cows. She'd been calling Mum Cow all week, so I was like, no, Mum's mum, that's a cow. She'd never seen cows like properly before, so it was nice to do that with her. Yeah, like I say, you can feed most of the animals. They do talks throughout the day. They've got like meerkat talk there, they've got all sorts of things. And I think the last event when we went was reindeer feeding, which I did mention in the vlogs, that it was just too late in the day and we just wanted to get back by that point. Otherwise, I think that would be pretty epic to do, to be fair. And you don't have to pay extra for those talks or like the feeding times. You just turn up at a certain place at a certain time, which I think is great, because some places you have to pay like extra on top, which makes things expensive. The thing I really loved is that they had that indoor play area. I showed it on the vlogs, and it was just nice. It meant that Nelly could be out of her pushchair. She could just roam free and explore, because obviously she's still crawling. She's not fully walking. She'll walk holding someone's hand, but she's not got the confidence to do it on her own. So she's still crawling. So it's not like she could crawl around the farm park, because she'd have no knees left for starters. So yeah, it was just nice to like let her in there and she could play with toys. She went down the slide. She was playing with some fire truck thing and another truck, which she absolutely loved, just pushing things about. We tried to hide all the toys that she had at home, like they had a VTech walker and things like that, and we were trying to hide them so that she would explore new things. But she had a whale of a time, and to be honest, she didn't actually want to leave. We had a little bit of a tantrum trying to get her to leave, so I had to bribe her and say we'd go around to see the cows again. So we did end up doing basically 2 laps of most of it. And yeah, they had like birds there and all sorts. It was more than just your average farm, that's for sure. They did also have an outdoor area. Nelly went on the trampoline, but she caused a bit of a stir because there was 3 boys on there, and Nelly's very into her boys at the minute, and she just decided to spread eagle out on the trampoline when they were trying to jump around, so it made it a little bit awkward, so we soon got her off of there. But they had like the giant jumping pillows and things like that. They had swings. Like, it was a nice outdoor area as well. I would say it was more tailored for slightly older ones, but if you've got a younger one, to be fair, you've got the play area we went in. There was also a soft play, but I just couldn't face it. If you've been to soft play, you'll know why. So there is plenty to do aside from the animals, and you would have seen Nelly driving the tractor around as well, which she absolutely loved. So then on to the Bomber Command Centre. This has been something that I've wanted to do for years, and I'm so glad I finally got to see the memorial. I've mentioned before on this channel, I've been a huge advocate of Bomber Command and in them getting the recognition they deserve, because unfortunately it's a bit of a taboo subject. People don't like the idea of the people that flew these huge bombers that caused so much destruction. You know, when you think of like Dresden and places like that. And unfortunately, those people were kind of tainted in a way. But ultimately, they were just doing their job. You know, they were the people that were sons, they were brothers, they were fathers. Like, they didn't necessarily want to harm people, but they were in the RAF. They were doing their job. And unfortunately, for so many of them, they just didn't come home. And so that they've now got this International Bomber Command memorial that commemorates that. And yeah, it was really special to see and nice to walk around. I think because we'd been to the National Memorial Arboretum, I wouldn't say it was a bit underwhelming. It wasn't at all, but it was just nice to look around. But I don't think it necessarily had that huge wow factor, because at the start of the week we've seen so many memorials, but that's nothing to take away from that in itself. We did pre-book the parking, which was £3. I'm glad we did, in a sense, because it meant that it was easier, because there was quite a queue when we got in to pay for the parking, so we kind of like bypassed that bit a little bit, which was good. You don't have to pre-book the parking. It didn't really make all that much difference. We still had to give our registration in, and it just, or our name or something, and she just checked it off to say that we were there. There was a wedding going on in the grounds, so like the memorials say like here, and the wedding was like here facing the memorial. And I get, you know, sometimes you've got like a connection to it or something, maybe it, you know, it's your granddad or something like that, but I just found it a bit, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I found it a bit strange that you would have your wedding on the grounds of a memorial of all these lost souls. I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe, I don't know, maybe it is just me. I just found it a bit odd. And, you know, we were all trying to like take in this memorial and things like that, and then you could hear whooping because they'd said their vows. And then, you know, we were looking around a bit more, but then they were playing really loud music because like you know, it was their wedding party. And I don't know, it clashed a bit. I kind of feel like if it was going to be that, then maybe the memorial place shouldn't have been open to the public, because that was the other thing. They were doing the vows and Nellie started having a tantrum, and I was thinking, oh my God, like this is right in the middle of their wedding. Like it made it feel awkward. I still enjoyed looking around, but I do wonder if maybe that didn't give the significance as much. I don't know. We also got to see the ceramic poppies, which you may have seen has been on the news. It's in the shape of a Lancaster. However, as you would have seen in the video clips, you can't really see that it's a Lancaster from the ground. I feel like they should have just had like more of a viewing platform. We had it at RIA with the F-16s where you could go up onto this viewing platform and look down and take photos. And I feel like that would have been more beneficial, even if it was slightly further away, like you still would have been able to see it a little bit better. So yeah, that was a little bit disappointing, but I'm glad that I saw it, and yeah, it was nice to see. In terms of the actual exhibition that was on, that was amazing. They had like newsreels playing and different bits like that, all about different sections of the wall. There were interactive screens so that when you walked by, somebody would talk to you. Frighten the life out of you a lot of the time, but would then tell these stories, and they'd be dressed up as if it was their story. So like there was a boy that had been evacuated, there was like a woman in the services, there was a lady, I can't think where she was to. I want to say it was possibly Arnhem, I think. And it was all these different locations, and they were telling the story as if it was their story, and it really did bring it home. But for me, the one thing that really got me was it was a 10-minute, I suppose you would say, video. And it was basically just a map of Europe, and it went from the start of the war right up to the end of the war. And it had a dot of an explosion for each. Small bombs were like obviously a small dot, and then medium and bigger. There was a large raid. There was several other bits and pieces that were included on it as well, and it showed where these bombs went off all over Europe, and it was so interesting but harrowing at the same time to know that there was, for every bomb there was people killed and injured, and it really put it into perspective. I think that's the best way I think I've ever seen somebody or something describe how the bombing campaign was. I just was fixated on Cardiff because that's where my nan was at the time, and just seeing all these bombs rain down and things like that. And my nan always said to me, we were one of the first, you know, to get bombed and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, right, nan, like, you know. And looking at this map, I was like, she was telling the truth. Like, they generally were bombed so early in the war. And I literally stood there and I was like, sorry, nan, I didn't listen to you, you know. But yeah, and just seeing how much as well, because she's spoken about it, and she'd spoken about being in a Morrison shelter and things like that. But yeah, to really see it really hit home, I have to say. On to the last day, and we did RAF Metheringham, which I didn't really do much research into. I didn't really know fully what was there. I did have a leaflet, but unfortunately Nellie ate it. So I didn't really know what was there at all. I just knew that for all the years that I'd been going to Lincolnshire, there was always a signpost for RAF Metheringham Visitor Centre. And I was like, you know what? Next time it's going to be my #1 place that we have to go to. I was so pleasantly surprised. The staff were so welcoming. That didn't pleasantly surprise me, but they were so welcoming. They really knew their stuff. They really knew their history. They had a beautiful display, which one of the staff came up and explained, because to the normal person it just looked like they had a load of Lancaster models hanging from the ceiling, and it wasn't until this man explained that each of those model bombers represented a number, and that number was the bomber that left RAF Metheringham. So it was like everybody was included. Everyone that had served during the war at RAF Metheringham was included in the history of this site. They had so many artefacts. They had newspapers, original newspapers, like on a table that you could look at. They had stories of the men. They had stories of what they did and what the airfield did and various things like that. The owner of the site was there, and he was talking about the things that you can see, because the visitor centre is only a small section of what was the original airfield. And he was talking about how, you know, when they do the harvest and things like that, you can still see the runway. There's little bits of the runway you can still drive on, like all this information that in a lot of the big mainstream museums, such as like Imperial War Museum and things like that, the staff and volunteers don't necessarily have that wealth of knowledge. I definitely found that going to the smaller places like RAF Meverenham had so much more information that they could give. And then one of the main highlights of RAF Meverenham is that you can go and sit in the Dakota. Now, obviously they've spent a lot of time, effort, money in this Dakota, so you can't just wander in and out at your leisure. You go in with a tour guide, and our tour guide was called Roy, and I doubt he'd ever watch this video, but he was amazing. He was the perfect person that we could have picked. There was 2 men in there at the time, and the other one, whilst nice, I think he was more suited to older people. I'm not saying he wouldn't have been fine for us, but I feel like he wasn't necessarily as family orientated from what I could tell. Whereas Roy, like, he took us on board, he explained various different things, he asked if we had questions along the way, if there was anything we wanted to know. But the main thing for me was that he included Nellie. And despite how young she was, you know, he was like, go in and sit in the cockpit. So all 3 of us went in and sat in the cockpit, and he turned around to Nellie and was like, right, grab that one and pull it back. And she did, and she was having a whale of a time pulling these levers and all sorts. And yeah, it just made it extra special, and he really was an amazing tour guide. And I made him smile at the end because I remembered the Dakota when it was at North Weald before they got hold of it. And yeah, so it was just nice. I could like add my little piece to it as well. It was such a memorable day, and so special as well, because you don't get to normally go in a Dakota. If you're going to go in a Dakota, it might just be a cockpit, or you know, you might have been lucky enough to go in one, but it is a very rare thing to be able to do. So yeah, it made for some special memories, that's for sure. And he like took our photo in the cockpit, and he made sure that we had those like family memories of our holiday as well, which yeah, it was super, super special. And it was such a reasonable price as well. So it was £7.15 per adult, and under 16s are free. So yeah, definitely get down and check it out if you're in the area. One of the other really nice things as well is you got to go in the shelter, and it's a little bit out of the way. You've kind of like got backtrack through the car park, but definitely don't miss it out because you can go inside it. And yeah, it really put into perspective. Obviously, you may know that I like a lot of wartime books. I always hear about like being in the shelter and Shelter Life and things like this. And obviously this is a shelter that's on an RAF base, which some of my books have been set if I've been reading about the WAFs and things like that. So yeah, it was just so good to stand in what was an original shelter, one that, you know, crews would have sheltered in when needed to, and just seeing how small it was and the capacity that it supposedly could take, and it just really put it into perspective, that is for sure. And then obviously the other thing we did on that last day was to go to Thorpe Camp, which, whoa, I definitely underestimated how big it was. Massively. I thought it was going to be, you know, like an hour's look around and that'd be that. And it was so, so much more than that. I loved the private collection. I can't think of the man's name. I presume it's the owner of the place, but he had a private collection of World War I stuff, which you very rarely get to see these days. And it was just there, like helmets from each of the forces, you know, like German, English, like various different ones, shell cases, like there was just so much there. There was like a embroidered handkerchief and yeah, things like that, and you could really like get up close and see them. It was also at Thorpe Camp where I saw the photo of Bomber Command at the Petwood, and yeah, there was just so much to see. So much World War II stuff and beyond as well. Like they had the Wessex, they had the Lightning. We took a really lovely photo of Nellie with the Lightning, which was super, super special. My favourite bit I'd probably say is the home front bit, but then it always is. Like I'm always so attached to like home front stuff during the Second World War. I loved looking around it, I'm not gonna lie. Even looking around, and my nan, bless her, she still had like utility furniture and a lot of the stuff that she'd had from growing up either being given like as gifts or like wedding gifts and things like that. When she got married in the 1950s, and obviously, yeah, I like looked at some of the home front stuff and I was like, oh, I recognise that. And there was so many things that I recognised that I knew were authentic to the time, but just gave me that little bit of nostalgia. And then I looked over to one corner, and there sat in the corner was the identical cabinet of my glass cabinet that sat downstairs. And yeah, it made me smile. It was like a little bit of my family were there. I just loved looking at the home front stuff, the way that it was set out. They had the most beautiful parachute silk wedding dresses, which were obviously used at the time if you could get your hands on the silk, and all these like different things that again you don't normally get to see. Like Imperial War Museum have probably got it, and they probably will display it in one of their locations at some point, but it's not something that you can go there and see all the time, and I think that just made it so much more special. So for Thorpe Camp, it was £7 per adult, and under 12s were free, which again is great. The only thing I would bear in mind with both RAF Meveringham and with Thorpe Camp, double check their opening times because they're very select. It's usually like weekends, and I think Thorpe Camp might be a Wednesday in the summer as well, because obviously their staff are usually volunteers and they have other things going on. If you do visit Thorpe Camp, go down to the RAF, are they calling it, like a naffy type thing, because they do the most amazing Victoria sponge there, and you have to try some. And that is also where you'll find the little shop as well. So definitely pop down there if you want a little souvenir or a nice bit of cake. Then I just thought I would round off this video by talking a little bit more about the Tattershall Lakes Park itself. Obviously we've been before, but we didn't really explore much because we had a young baby at that point. So yeah, we didn't get to explore. So I was determined to explore a little bit more this time. And one of the things that Nellie absolutely adored was the play parks, especially the toddler park. She loved the toddler park. We ended up down there most evenings, to be honest with you. Even if it was just for 10 minutes, she loved it. And it's kind of been something that we've continued here as well. She's absolutely adored going to the parks when the weather is good enough. We booked swimming for a couple of times, and we'd done the swimming before, so we kind of knew what to expect. If you're wondering, the water is quite warm, but the pool is on the smaller side. They do have an outside one, but when we've gone at that particular time of the year, it hasn't been open, or it's been open like one day, and yeah, so we haven't used the outside one, but we do use the inside one. I would say the first time we did the swim, which was during the week, it was nice and quiet. There was like 2 other families in there. You could swim about a bit, like it was fine. The second time we did it was on the Saturday morning, so obviously there was more people there, and yeah, it was just overcrowded. I think they probably had too many people in there because you just couldn't swim, you couldn't move. You kept getting kicked by people that were like next to you. You had kids like jumping in right next to you. It was just, yeah, it wasn't the one. So if you're there for more than a weekend, definitely book the swimming. If you're there just for the weekend, bear in mind it is very, very busy and very small. We also booked the toddler splash, which was a bit weird because I like went up to the desk, said we were there for toddler splash, and she went, oh, just go on down. That was all she said. Thankfully, I knew that when you go down there, you go to the right instead of the left for the swimming. But all she said was just go on down. The door was locked, but thankfully they come and unlock the door because we were the first there. And to be fair, the swimming changing room was locked as well. So they unlocked both doors, you know, and that wasn't an issue as such. But so we just got dressed and went through to the toddler area, and there was nobody there. Like, I didn't necessarily expect there to be somebody there, but what happened was we went round for a little walk and it was all working, and then it all stopped. There were no signposts to say do this to get it working or anything like that, and we were halfway through our time, and the lifeguard from the other side had come through and was like, oh, if you stand on all these things it gets everything working. Which I just wish, if like the lady on reception had either said something or there was signs saying it, then we would have known what to do, because we'd never done it before. But yeah, so I was just a little bit like, it was a little bit of a letdown. Nellie enjoyed it in the main part, but yeah, I don't know if I'd book it again. That's all I would say. And to be fair, the bit that they had, like the flooring they had bits of gravel in, and it was actually quite painful to walk on, I'm not gonna lie. So if we were to go back to there or somewhere else, I don't know if I would do the toddler splash, because not only that, by the time we'd had like our half of our session and not really done anything, the next session were coming in for the start of their session, like towards the end of ours, and then they took over the slides. So then Nelly kind of didn't really have anything to go on because they were just like hogging the slide in a way. So yeah, I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a wasted morning, but it is what it is. We know how to use it for future if we were to do it. We didn't make it to the evening entertainment. I did want to go to, was it Bear in the Woods, I think it was called, in the Big Top, which is like their main evening area for like kids entertainment and various other things, but it never quite transpired to be the right time to go. When it was on, we were either just getting back or we were just eating, or like timings just didn't work out, sadly. We were going to go on the last evening, but then Nelly had a tantrum and decided that she wanted to go to bed, so that was that. So we just didn't get there, so I can't really comment on that. However, I could hear it and it did sound like people were having a lot of fun. As I mentioned in the segment about the Bluebell, we did pop down there to get some ciders and have like a nice little sit outside, which you would have seen in the first vlog or second vlog. They were the most expensive ciders I think I've ever had. They almost beat RIAT prices. It basically cost us £14 for 2 ciders, and in comparison, if you're wondering, at the Bluebell we paid £6.50 I think it was for 2 ciders. It was extortionate. And yeah, I definitely we didn't order any more ciders on site, that is for sure. And it made me like think I'm definitely not ordering food there as well, because I'm sure that was just as expensive. But if you do want to, then obviously just take the extra money and be prepared, I guess. But because we were doing everything on a budget, and yeah, it wasn't for us. It was nice to sit outside with a cider, but yeah, it wasn't the best cider. It wasn't a great price. The only thing that was good was the location. We did, however, spend some time in the arcades. We had taken our spare change with us that we've been saving up for the year and spent some money, and I've come home with a hell of a lot of little ducks for Nelly, which she adores. She gives them kisses all the time, so she's happy. So that's the main thing. And I love a good 2p machine. I would say it is quite small in there, so like where the 2p machines are, with the pram, no one could get past us, which made it a little bit awkward when people needed to get past us. But other than that, like, we had a great time in there. And yeah, like I say, come home with, I think it was like 6 ducks or something between there and Skegness. 6 ducks was more than enough. And then the last thing I thought I'd mention is the little walks we went on. So we did a couple of times go around the whole of the park. It took us just over an hour, and we went literally from like where we were staying up round in a big circle and come back down past the Big Top. And yeah, it was just pleasant to just wander around. We did notice there was a lot of gaps where caravans used to be, because obviously we did the same walk last year, and we actually walked up to where we stayed last time and it was a gap. So I get that we couldn't have stayed in that caravan. We could have just stayed somewhere similar, should we say. But it is what it is. We enjoyed the walk around anyway. We also did a really nice walk along the canal, which you would have seen. I definitely recommend that if you want something free and nice to do in the evening, seeing all the wildlife. Yeah, it was pleasant, especially because we'd had such nice weather. It was nice to just be out enjoying the evening, particularly because we didn't have any seating outside at our caravan. Yeah, so that is kind of my little roundup. Very chatty, as I mentioned at the beginning. We mentioned at the start of the vlogs that we wouldn't come back, and then towards the end we said we might come back. I haven't booked to go back, and I'm still very much on the fence. I don't think I would go there with the same enjoyment as what I had last year because of this year's one. I'm toying with the idea that maybe I just need to find somewhere else to stay. There are a few other parks there as well. I don't know. I like staying there for the sense of it's good for like spotting. There's some family friendly things to do there and things like that. But the caravan situation and the issues we had this time definitely put a dampener on it, and for something that we paid such a lot of money for, and you know, we saved up and paid off for the year. I don't know, it was a little bit of a letdown come finish. I may possibly stay there again. We have talked about it, as I say, and if we do, it wouldn't be next year, maybe the year after, because we'd save up and make sure we got a luxurious one to ensure we've got that balcony. But for the price you pay just for that little bit of extra that you get, because it's not a lot, yeah, I don't know if it would be worth the money that they charge. However, if you're just going for like basic and you don't have those issues, you know, you don't have a toddler or things like that, then maybe it'd be for you. And who knows, maybe we just had a bad time this time, I don't know, because the first time was amazing and we were in this little bubble and it was great, whereas obviously this time we've had a few issues and one thing or another, and yeah. So yeah, that rounds up the holiday vlog for this year. We have got some trips booked very, very soon, so you'll be seeing them in the future if that's the kind of thing you're into, but they will be in my own caravan, I have to say. It'll be a lot smaller because it is a touring caravan, it's not a static caravan, but I'm very much looking forward to it. But thank you all so much for watching, and if you've stuck here to the end, then bravo. I will be back next time with another video. Bye bye.